Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Ogbanje Joseph. Please hit the subscribe button to subscribe to this channel. Today we are going to be looking at the role of literature review in a research work. The role of literature review in a research work. Now, literature review is a survey of important articles, books, and other sources pertaining to a research topic. Okay, now the review of literature contextualizes or frames a research, and it also gives the readers the necessary background to understand a research. Okay, now the main purpose of literature review is to clarify some fundamental concepts involved in the study, to find out whether scholar or professionals have gaps to be filled. Okay, literature review has an obligation to be critical, to view again. So when we talk about literature review, we are actually looking at the review of relevant literature in an exercise which the researcher tries to identify, locate, read, and evaluate previous studies, observations, opinions, and comments related to his intended research. Such a review is aimed at providing the researcher with a good knowledge of the state of the art in the area he intends to carry out the research. So now, literature review affords the researcher the opportunity of knowing the areas that have been covered and the areas that remain to be covered, the techniques that have been used in the investigation and the ones that have not been used in such an investigation. Okay, so that is actually what is known as literature review. Now, in literature review, the researcher does not merely summarize the research findings, that other report or researchers have done, but it also evaluates and comments on each study's worth and validity. So when we talk about literature review, we are actually looking at the review of relevant articles, journals, books, and texts that are relevant to the researcher's work. Now it saves students time, from duplicating previous studies, using unproductive techniques, and the lack of contribution to the advancement of knowledge. When you are doing literature review, you are not merely summarizing, but you are evaluating. You are actually chronologically identifying the gaps that have been noticed in works that you have seen. So literature review, it helps the researcher to actually identify gaps that have been noticed. It helps the researcher to actually look at what other scholars have done for the purpose of evaluating it, and ensuring that all the gaps that need to be filled are filled. So when you are doing literature review, you are not just merely summarizing, but you are looking at what one scholar A has said vis-a-vis one scholar B has said, and then you bring out the gaps that have been noticed between these two opinions, and then you add your own to it. So this is what one scholar has done, this is what the other scholar has done, then you actually pick hole to it and then add, pick hold, on them, and then add your own to it. Okay, so what are the sources of literature? What are the sources of literature? Literature can be gotten from books, journals, and periodicals, okay, magazines and newspapers, students' projects, dissertation and thesis, encyclopedia, okay, and dictionaries. Okay, so but what are the purposes? What are the purposes? Why? What are the purposes of literature review? The first purpose of literature review, okay, is to contextualize the contribution of other scholars, to the research problem being studied. Okay, that is number one. Number two is to describe the relationship of each work to to the others under consideration. Number three, to identify new ways to interpret prior research. Then number four, to review any gaps that exist in the literature. Then number five, to point the way in fulfilling a need for additional research. Number seven, to identify areas of prior scholarship to prevent duplication of efforts. Then number seven, to locate your own research within the context of existing literature. Okay, now those are the purposes, of literature. Those are the purposes of literature. But what are the functions? What are the functions of literature review in a research work? What are the functions? Number one, it helps to introduce, the researcher, to varieties of works done in the area of study. Number two, it facilitates identification of problems, refinement of ideas, and specification of research procedure. Then number three, it reveals to the beneficiary of the research new, important, believable, and useful findings or information on their discipline. Okay, then number four, it promotes justification and motivation of additional information or replication of a research. Number five, it enables a researcher to delve into new area with the knowledge acquired from previous works. Number six, it enhances the theoretical linkage when one is familiar with and builds on the past works. Then number seven, it facilitates arriving at a complex analytical understanding of a research area. Okay, so those are the functions or the usefulness or the importance of a research of literature review. Okay, now when we also talk about literature review, don't forget that I have said in my previous videos that literature review is divided into three main compartments. The first is conceptual framework. The second is empirical review. The third is theoretical framework or theoretical review. Now, I have talked about literature review, but what I have not said is the conceptual framework. We are actually going to look at the conceptual framework in our next video. But what is important right now is that we are talking about literature review. And I have actually talked about the purposes or the usefulness or the need for literature review, in an academic research work. Thank you very much.